I want to give a little biography of Rose Marie before we get started. I'm going to be basically reading it right from the paper you have in your hand, so if you want to follow along, that's fine. A fourth-generation Texan, Rose Marie Simmons, spent 14 years as a public school teacher in the Arlington ISD and Dallas ISD, and 20 years as a professional training consultant to several major corporations. An avid genealogist, she applied to the Texas Historical Commission and received a Historic Texas Cemetery designation for the Beeman Memorial Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in Dallas County. Currently, she teaches English as a second language at her former high school, W.W. Samuel. On November 22, 1963, Rose Marie was with her father and twin sister at Love Field, awaiting the arrival of President and Mrs. Kennedy. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's take a look at the first slide. All right, there is Rose Marie Simmons as a high school student back in 1963. This is what she looked like. Very nice. What grade were you in at the time?
I was in the 11th grade.
11th grade. And tell me what the circumstances that brought you to Love Field that morning.
Well, of course, we had it publicized in the newspaper that Kennedy was going to be in Dallas, and he was arriving at Love Field, the only airport in Dallas at the time, and making a trip through downtown to go to be a guest speaker. And we decided that to go to Love Field because thinking we would have more of an opportunity to actually see him rather than just see him driving by in a car. So we wanted to see him land and arrive at the airport. And my father suggested that we miss a day of school to go downtown and go down to the airport to wave to Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy and President Kennedy.
And this was going to be an excused absence from school?
This was supposed to be an excused absence from school, yes, because our father requested that we leave school for the day. But there were extenuating circumstances with my history teacher.
Well, tell us about your history teacher, what her name was, and the exchange that the two of you had.
Okay, Miss Rose Callahan was the American history teacher, and I was extremely excited, so I told her that I was going to see the president the next day. And she said, it's not going to be excused from my class unless you get his autograph and bring it back and show it to me in the class. So I said I would do my best. I would try to get the president's autograph when we went to Love Field. So I was hoping I could.
So she demanded nothing less than a note from the president in order to excuse you from her history class.
That would be my excuse.
Let's take a look at the next slide and see what this history teacher looked like. There she is. Yeah, I think I would do whatever that lady said to me. Was she a strict teacher, or did you enjoy being in her class?
I think she was definitely on the strict side, but she was also very personable and knew so much about American history that you enjoyed every day learning more about what, from the presidents on down to what happened in the early Americas.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we talk about being out there at Love Field to see the president that morning, tell me just a little bit about yourself and what was important to you as an 11th grader there in 1963.
Well, probably my studies were kind of secondary. Of course, being with my friends and going to football games and listening to new music. Back then was when the Beatles first came to the United States, and that was all the rage for the girls, of course, to be involved in the Beatles music.
Were you a fan of President Kennedy?
Well, he was so, he and his wife were so young, maybe not much, very compared to the Obamas. They're very young, in their 40s when he became president. And it was exciting to see someone who had small children you could identify with a younger man, and he preceded, Mr. Eisenhower, who had been there for so many years and not as someone we could not necessarily identify with, but I admired him just because he was handsome. His wife wore beautiful clothes and in the magazine. So yes, it I definitely admired him and look forward to seeing him in that respect.
Now, your father was involved in the Democratic Party, is that correct?
He was, yes, he was. And that is what I think precipitated him to go on down to Love Field, where some of the other people, Democratic people, were, and want to bring his children along as well. But that's where they met, and of course, President Kennedy was a Democrat as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, take me through that experience. This is Friday, November 22nd, 1963. Tell me about when you arrived at the airport and what happened after that.
Okay, well, there were really more people at Love Field than I had anticipated, and a lot of them just standing around and talking, mostly adults, not that many teenagers, which I was, and we also had 3 friends with us that came with us to Love Field. And so we found a spot close to the fence because we could figure out, from how the police were standing, that the airplane would land and then the president would probably walk along the fence to get into the motorcade and the convertibles that they would drive to downtown. So we just there were kind of waves of, excitement going through the crowd, and also with our friends when we first realized that the airplane was getting ready to touch down, and it was the president's plane. There were 2 of them.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. And there it is, Air Force One. I imagine that was a pretty dramatic sight with the seal on the side of the plane.
That's right, and I didn't know it said United States of America or Air Force One on it at all, so I thought it'd be American Airlines or Southwest Airlines or somebody that some designation that I recognized. So
yeah, but there's no doubt that that's the president's plane right there.
That was the president's plane for sure, and it came from Fort Worth, where he had been the night before as a speaker.
How did the crowd start to react when the plane was there and people knew that it was just moments before the president would disembark and greet the crowd?
Well, everyone, was making oohs and ahs sounds, of course, because we knew it would be, soon before they would depart, and getting closer and closer to the fence, more, pushing a little bit forward so that they could be hopefully get to see him better and to touch him, and some people had cameras and even binoculars to look.
Did you see any hecklers in the crowd? Anybody that was out there to protest the president's visit to Dallas?
Well, I didn't. Not from my vantage point. I didn't really see protesters. Some people may have had signs, but I wasn't cognizant of what they actually said.
You were focused on wanting to see them.
I was focused on one thing, right. And probably I could see them in the back, because they, if so, they would have been facing the president. But no, not really. If there were, it was very, very minor.
Let's take a look at the next picture, please. All right, and there's the receiving line right up to the door of the plane, and there you can just see them emerging. There's Mrs. Kennedy in her pink suit, and then right behind her is the President of the United States. So tell me about this moment.
Okay, well, they were still quite far away, but the pink suit that she wore was just so bright, and she had a hat on to match, and it was just exciting to see her come down the stairs. And later we learned, as time went by, that he had her go first because she was so popular, and the crowd really wanted to see what she was wearing rather than him. So he had her go first so that everyone could be ready and willing to ask questions about Miss Kennedy, about Jackie.
You'll notice here that this is a black and white picture, and in 1963 all the television sets were black and white. And so I imagine it was pretty exciting to get to see the president in color.
That's true. That's very true. So everything was black and white later, but you remember the vivid colors of it.
Right. You would have seen Kennedy in color in maybe Life magazine or Look magazine, but it was a very rare moment to see the president in motion, to see Kennedy actually moving and in color at the same time. We take that for granted today because on the nightly news, probably every single night you can see President Obama in color, but that was a pretty rare occurrence in 1963, 45 years ago. Was there anything about Kennedy or Jackie physically, seeing them in person, that struck you that was different from the image you saw on television?
Well, I thought they were more handsome, more handsome in person. You know, the coloring of their hair and eyes, and seemed to be more lifelike, of course, being in person. But they would just seem to be taller and bigger and just vivacious. Mm-hmm. Just a really great couple that had a rapport with the crowd. Right. Very, very much so.
Let's take a look at the next picture, please. All right, and there they are coming down the steps of Air Force One, and they're going to be greeting the crowd. Receiving line was the Vice President, Lyndon Johnson, and his wife, Lady Bird, as well as the Mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell, and his wife, Deary, and quite a few other Dallas business executives and people that were greeting the President upon his arrival. Did you have to wait very long before he, from the time he left the plane to when he came over and started greeting the crowd?
Yeah, it was quite a few minutes because, as you could see from the previous picture, they had to shake hands of all the Dallas dignitaries and state dignitaries and so forth, and began shaking hands near the plane, quite a ways from where we were standing at the fence, past the where the motorcade would begin. Mm-hmm. So we had to wait quite a few minutes.
But you were able to see the entire time, and you knew what was going on?
Well, we were standing, my friend and I were standing on a concrete device that was like a platform next to a tree so that we could be taller and could look out over the crowd. So we could see him coming along and thinking that we were only going to get to see him, not actually speak to him, though. But so we were able to have a vantage point and see where he was at the time.
But Kennedy actually did something very surprising. He walked right over to the fence line and started shaking hands.
Right, and the Secret Service was very nervous, and they had to follow him along to see where he was going to go. Not unlike the president now, Mr. Obama, where he wants to go out and touch the people and shake their hands, and Kennedy was a lot like that as well. Mm-hmm. And so he goes along and starts shaking all the hands and keeps moving closer and closer to where we are down the fence line, and they expected him to make a turn to get into the car, but instead he just continues walking, which is closer to my direction. So I was excited about that.
And tell me what happened.
So he did come on down. I moved off of the concrete platform and went just a couple of steps to the fence, and I had a little piece of paper in case I saw him and he was able to sign give me his autograph. And so I was able to shake his hand. Of course, we had after him other dignitaries as well, but shaking his hand and speaking to him was the highlight of my day, no doubt.
And what did you say to the president?
So I reach out and shake his hand, and I tell him that my history teacher, Miss Callahan, wanted me to get his autograph so I could be excused from class. And he said in his Boston accent that I can't because there's too many people here and he would have to give autographs to everybody. So he asked that I write his personal secretary, Miss Kennedy, and that she would send me an autograph picture, and that would be my excuse from history class. I
think it was Evelyn Lincoln, actually.
Oh, and who did I say?
Kennedy.
Yes.
Yeah, Evelyn Lincoln.
Evelyn Lincoln, thank you. Yes, yeah. Evelyn Lincoln was President Kennedy's personal secretary. Right. Thank you.
But you had this wonderful little personal interaction with the president, just briefly there as he made his way down the fence
Right,
line.
And he was speaking to everyone, it appeared, as he came along, but I was able to have a conversation, ask him a question. He responded, very polite, and just kept on moving. And then, of course, next was Jackie and I think the Vice President, Lyndon Johnson, and then Mr. Conley, the governor as well.
We're very fortunate to have this moment actually recorded on film. A photographer from one of the Dallas newspapers was there and snapped a picture at just the right moment to capture this. Let's take a look at the next picture, Corey, please. And there we are. You can see there is the president and there is Mrs. Kennedy right there. And then right here, that is Rose Marie Simmons. And in fact, if you watch, you can follow along, and there's her hand. She's extending her hand through the crowd, and that's the hand that's about to shake the president just a few seconds later. Considering the the large crowds at Love Field, it is extraordinary to have a picture this clear where you can see the president and you can see the person you're looking for. I mean, that's just wonderful to have a picture like that for the museum's archives. You first saw this picture about 40 years or so after the assassination, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know we were actually in a photograph.
But you came down to the museum and we sat, I remember we sat at my desk, this was about 5 or so years ago, and we looked through all of the pictures from the Dallas Times-Herald archives to try to find a picture with you in it, and we were both very excited when we came across this picture.
And as the fence actually is going toward me,
right.
And it's not that I'm that far away, because all I had to do was step down, and I was right there at the fence. So that was just, yeah, that's an amazing picture. It means a lot to me to have found that too.
And this lady standing next to you, this is your friend from school?
That's my friend from school, Diane Van Zant. And my sister, we think, is over to my right and a little bit lower.
Okay.
So the next, that's her right there.
Oh, right there? Okay.
We're pretty sure, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay. If you look in the crowd, notice all the cameras. You got a camera there and a camera there, and there's, I think, another one somewhere. But yeah, a lot of these pictures have never surfaced. And that's one of the exciting things about getting to work here, because you never know when someone's going to visit the museum and have these extraordinary pictures, either of the motorcade or pictures from Love Field. Even almost half a century later, people continue to come to the museum sometimes with pictures that have been in dusty shoeboxes in their attics or in their closets, and we're always excited to find new photography from the day of the assassination. And so we're still on the lookout for people like this one right here and this one right here, people that took pictures, and this guy right here, people that took pictures the day of the presidential visit, because there's actually not that many pictures from Love Field that were taken by the crowd, by amateur photographers in the crowd that have surfaced. So you saw President Kennedy, and the president made his way to the limousine, got in the car, and proceeded in the motorcade. And what happened to you after that? How did you find out about the assassination?
We were, you know, if everyone broke off and started heading back to their cars, because by this time the motorcade, several of them with all the reporters, headed toward downtown Dallas from Love Field. And we went to our car, and this is probably where my memory fails me a little bit, but we did not return back to school, because by then it was almost 12 o'clock or a little after. And so we went, dropped my father off and went to get something to eat. And at the restaurant where we were, they had one black and white television. And it was, the local programming was interrupted by a national reporter that told about President Lincoln had been shot and was pronounced dead a few moments later. Or, you know.
And having just seen President Kennedy a few minutes earlier, how did this impact you?
It was hard to believe. You couldn't accept that at that point in time, that a living person would be shot, and why would someone want to shoot someone, a leader of your country, and someone that was so personable and just his goal was to help people. And we couldn't believe it. After being in shock, of course, everyone in the restaurant was crying and just talking about how horrible it was that it happened in Dallas.
Mm-hmm. The 4 days that took place between Friday when the president was shot and Monday when his funeral took place, those were 4 very intense days, and most people, and I'm sure you did too, spent the weekend pretty much watching television,
right,
nonstop. The alleged assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, who worked here in this building, he was arrested within just an hour and a half of the shooting, and then 48 hours later, then he was shot on live television while he was in police custody. And so all of this was happening very, very quickly, and then on Monday, the president and the alleged assassin and a Dallas police officer who was killed that weekend, all 3 of them were all buried. Their funerals were on Monday, which was a national day of mourning. And you would not have gone to school on Monday.
No, that was the day off for everyone in the country.
Right. So you would have gone back to your history class on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, yes.
Tell me about your history teacher. Did you have any exchange right away? When did the conversation about seeing the president take place?
Well, it was certainly that week that we discussed it, and that was part of our American history class. So just discuss, everyone talked about where they were, and the school made an announcement to the other students on that Friday that he was shot. So the word traveled pretty quickly. But by the time I did have an opportunity to talk to my teacher, and I was sorry that I wasn't able to get his autograph, but she and I were both excited, Ms. Callahan and I, that I was able to speak to him. I was able to ask a question, about getting it, and I told her what she had said to write to his secretary, Ms. Lincoln, and she would send it to me. So Ms. Callahan said, I think you ought to do that. I think you ought to write to her and just put Washington, D.C. on the envelope. It'll get to her, and let her know whether she, has an opportunity to read it or not. At least you're telling her what he said to you, and that was probably important.
Mm-hmm. And the President's Secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, did receive your letter, and how long later did you receive a response?
It was less than a month.
Less than a month.
A few weeks. She sent me back a response to that, and a wonderful letter and an autographed picture.
And you brought that with you today.
Yes, I did. It arrived in a Washington, D.C. brown envelope, and I knew who it was from.
This is it right here, the letter and the autographed picture that she received. And the letter is actually dated December 12th, 1963. So remember, the assassination was only November 22nd, so this is just
about 3 weeks.
Yeah, just about 3 weeks later, less than a month. Everybody get a good look at that?
And I've found that this is the official White House photograph of Kennedy.
Right.
I've seen it in several other venues.
Would you read the letter to us?
If I can find my
glasses. Or I
glasses.
can read it. It's up to you.
Well, I'll be happy to.
Excellent.
I have to have some.
There you go.
And it says, Dear Marie, your letter touched me very much since you said the late president told you to write to me for a picture. That reference to me could not have been too long before the fatal shot. Therefore, I will always treasure your letter. It's a pleasure to send you a picture. President Kennedy appreciated your interest, and I'm sure. Sincerely, Evelyn Lincoln, personal secretary to the late President Kennedy.
Wonderful. And she enclosed with the letter an autographed picture that the president had signed prior to leaving for the trip to Dallas. Just wonderful. And that's a testament that you should always write to people. You never know who might respond. I remember when I was in school and I wrote to some celebrities, and you never know. Sometimes you get a response back, and this is something that you've treasured for 45 years now because of that. So that's really wonderful. Now, you probably never thought 4 decades ago that you would be sitting here in front of a group of students talking about this as a historical event. Is this something that you really enjoy talking about?
It is, because I probably don't really speak about it, in an everyday life. And if someone, usually on the anniversary, November 22nd, it's brought up in family conversations and so forth. But no, it means a lot to me. I have it hanging in my living room, and with some other artifacts that I have, and it's just something I'll never forget. And the fact of just the other part of writing a letter to Ms. Lincoln was that it also helped me express my feelings. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was also a way to communicate into kind of a healing process, since I felt like I was part of his day that day, that not a very minor part, but it was very something that affected me as well after his death.
Well, I know that around the 40th anniversary or so, you and your sister got the opportunity to be interviewed by the History Channel for a documentary. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, that's right. The History Channel on television. You don't ever think you'll be on the History Channel, but they came into town and gathered quite a few people that were involved in the communicating with President Kennedy during the day of the assassination. So we went back to Love Field and kind of recreated the scene, minus the airplane, and Love Field was totally different then. But that was a great experience, because they asked us how we felt. We got to just retrace our memory of what it was like to see the president. And then when they clipped it all, the film clip was all together, it actually had a continuity of the beginning. We felt like we were at the beginning of that show and the beginning of his day, his abbreviated day into Dallas. So that was pretty neat.
All right, we have a very historic individual here today who got to talk to President Kennedy the day of the assassination. And now it's your turn to maybe ask her some questions about what it was like to be there that day and see the president. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. Since we are recording this, I'll repeat your question into the microphone, and then she'll be able to answer it. And we'll start with you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, the question was, did you notice anybody suspicious there at the airport?
No one did not notice anybody suspicious at the airport, and there didn't seem to be anybody suspicious, in my opinion.
Good question. Other questions? Yes, sir. Oh, the question was, how did the police officer die the day of the assassination? I can take that one if you'd like.
Yeah, you probably.
Okay. After the assassination in the Dallas suburb of Oak Cliff across the Trinity River, there was a Dallas police officer who was on patrol. His name was J.D. Tippett, and he was shot, allegedly by Lee Harvey Oswald, the accused assassin of the president. What happened was, after the president's assassination here in Dealey Plaza, Oswald left this building about 3 minutes before it was sealed off by police. He got on a bus, and then he got off the bus and got into a taxi, and he went to his rooming house, his apartment where he was living in Oak Cliff. And he got a jacket and a pistol, and it was a few blocks over that this Dallas police officer was shot and killed. And just a few blocks away from that, on Jefferson Boulevard, Oswald was arrested in a movie theater. And all of this that I'm talking about took place within just an hour and 20 minutes after the assassination. But researchers and investigators have pretty much concluded that Oswald was the individual who shot the police officer. In fact, there's actually more concrete evidence, more physical evidence tying Oswald to the shooting of the police officer than there is actually tying him to the shooting of the president. There's just more evidence available in that particular murder investigation. So I hope that answers your question. Let's try to keep our questions focused on Ms. Simmons and her experiences at Love Field and seeing the president that day. And if you have other questions, I'll be happy to answer those later on as well. Yes? You want me to come back to you in a second? All right. Yes. Oh, where is your friend, the lady who's in the picture there?
That's a very good question, because I've tried to find her, when you have school reunions and so forth, and I have not seen her in about 30 years. So I'm not sure where she is. I believe somewhere in the San Antonio area. I think that's where she lives now. Not in Dallas, so we have not been able to communicate with each other.
That's an excellent question, because I'd like to find that person too.
That's right. You do want to find your old friends.
We've done over 600 of these oral histories for the museum's archives, and I'm always interested in finding new people who saw the president at Love Field or saw the motorcade, or certainly people who witnessed the assassination. And of all the people in this picture, Rose Marie is the only individual that I've had the chance to talk to. And then today I'm very pleased to add her sister to our oral history collection. Her sister's going to do an interview for me when this program is over today. So I'll have two people in this picture. But there's still all these faces and all these cameras, and I would sure like to know who these people are and track them down so they can give me their memories of seeing the president that day. Yes? The question is, what was Jack Ruby's involvement in the Kennedy assassination? I'll take that one if you'd like. Jack Ruby was a nightclub owner here in Dallas, and he is the gentleman who leapt out on live television and shot Oswald while he was in police custody. Whether or not he was involved in the murder of the president, that remains a mystery. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that Jack Ruby was involved in the Kennedy assassination at all. But to this day, people still suggest, and there are books being written that suggest that Jack Ruby was in some way involved, usually as part of a larger conspiracy involving the mafia. But that's really briefly all I can tell you about that. Did you remember your question? What is it? did you have any particular feelings when you actually got to meet the president and shake his hand? What was going through your mind?
Well, as a teen, I was looking at how tan he was. I was thinking about how he looked. But, how tan he was, his hair was kind of a reddish color, and that his pictures never did him justice. But it was just I was surprised he actually wanted to shake my hand, as a young person and so forth. But that's just a reaction that you have when you read about somebody and look up to somebody. And I think it's important to keep that distance and admiration of war leaders and president especially. But yeah, I didn't have any other feelings other than excitement and just curiosity and then happiness. He finally stopped my way, and I had a conversation with him.
I think I've always found it remarkable that you were able to actually speak to him, because I don't know if you guys have ever met anybody famous, but if you meet somebody famous, especially somebody you really admire, you freeze, and it's really difficult to get the words out because you're so excited that this person is right there in front of you. So the fact that you were able to ask him for an autograph and tell him about your history teacher, that's pretty remarkable.
Well, I think I had a little motivation from my my history teacher, because she put that upon me. You have to get his autograph, and so I was motivated as well. But I maybe came out of my shyness at that point to speak.
Now, if you had gotten an autograph that day, would you have given it to your history teacher, or would you have showed it to her and then kept it?
I believe I would have just shown it to her and kept it. I don't think she would have wanted me to turn it in,
right,
and not give it back.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure I heard your question. Say it again for me. Oh, yes. Yes. The question was the Parkland Hospital here in Dallas the same hospital where President Kennedy was taken? And the answer is yes. The president was taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital right here in Dallas. Some of you may have been to Parkland over the years. It looks very different today than it looked in 1963. Parkland was a lot smaller back then, 45 years ago, and in fact, the room where the president died is no longer at Parkland, but there is a pillar it's actually part of the radiology department. The trauma room, which was originally the emergency room where President Kennedy died, is now Parkland's radiology department, and the room is gone, but there's this pillar in the radiology department with a plaque that notes this was the spot where Trauma Room 1 was located where the president died. So you can still see that at Parkland Hospital to this day. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sure, of course.
I'm curious about the feelings and emotions that you felt that day. What other day in history since then would you compare how, as far as how you felt when another event happened after?
Okay. I'll repeat the question just so we can have it on the recording. The question was, what other day in your life sort of mirrors the emotional experience of the Kennedy assassination?
Well, I think it would have to be 9/11. I think that was the same magnitude, at least for me, to realize everything that happened and the death and the destruction and so forth. But it was just another strong, really strong emotion that you took personally. But that's the one that comes out in my mind. I know there's maybe been others for some people, but that was very, very strong.
Does any of you in this audience remember 9/11? Or are you guys a little too young? A couple of you? Some of you remember it? You guys would have been pretty young at that
2001.
time. 2001, yeah. So there are these moments in our lives where, especially moments of great tragedy that are covered globally by news networks all over the world. There are moments that sort of bring us together collectively, and certainly 9/11 is one. The bombing of Oklahoma City in 1995, the explosion of the Challenger, that's my cultural touchstone. I was in the first grade in 1986 when that happened. Other questions about this event? Yes, go ahead. Oh, you guys are really interested in Jack Ruby. Question was, what happened to Jack Ruby? I'll try to explain it very briefly. You guys have not toured the museum yet, but when you go down to the 6th floor, there'll be quite a lot of information about the assassination and these key people down there. But briefly, of course, Ruby was arrested for shooting Oswald. He went to trial in 1964 and was actually found guilty and given the death penalty. But he was not executed because the verdict in that trial was overturned by the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. And because they decided that Ruby could not have received a fair trial in Dallas. And so they decided that Mr. Ruby needed a new trial, and he was awaiting his new trial in jail. He was in the Dallas County Jail, which is actually a building right across the street here from the book depository. And he spent the remainder of his life there in that jail cell until late 1966, when he got ill and went to Parkland Hospital, the same hospital where President Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald died. Ruby went to Parkland suffering from pneumonia, but it was soon learned that he had advanced cancer, and he died January 3rd, 1967, of complications related to his cancer. And that's what happened to Ruby. He lived until 1967. Any other questions for Rose Marie today? Yes? President Kennedy, what street was he assassinated? It's the street right outside the window here, Elm Street. You can see it from the 6th floor. Actually, if you look out the windows, you can see the street, and there's a model showing you exactly where the limousine was at the time the shooting took place. Questions regarding the Love Field encounter that Ms. Simmons had with President Kennedy? Yes, ma'am. Oh, the question was, were you excused from class? I assume that you most certainly were.
Yes, I was.
Yeah, she was. You probably wouldn't have gone otherwise if it was going to be an absence, right?
I'm not sure. I think that I would have. It was such a special occasion. Not very often does a president come to your city, and so just knowing that that was happening, I think I would have done my best to come.
All right. We have time for one more question. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? That's a great question. The question is, were you comfortable wearing your hair like that? Was that a comfortable style for your hair?
Yes, that was very in style, and you know, it's a lot like Jackie's, like Jackie Kennedy wore. Everyone had a little bit of a flip. My hair is not the same color anymore, though. That just happens to you when you get a little bit older. Everyone in my family has hair this color now, so anyway.
But probably most of your classmates had hair just like that.
That's right. We all looked about the same. Yeah, just like today, the girls have long hair. Well, in my day, in '63, we had a flip.
Mm-hmm. Styles change over time,
That's
and as
right.
you look at old
So,
pictures,
yeah,
you'll see
I like
uniformity.
that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of our Living History session. We thank you so much for being here, and now it's your time to go visit the 6th and 7th floors of the museum. Thank you.
Thank you.